This first question comes from Bill Mitchell. I received more questions about this than any other question. He writes, Warren, in a 2003 Fortune article, you argued for import certificates to limit trade deficits and said these import certificates basically amounted to a tariff. But recently, you called tariffs an act of economic war. Has your view on trade barriers changed, or do you see import certificates as somehow distinct from tariffs?
Yeah, well, the import certificates were distinct, but their goal was to balance imports against exports, and so that the trade deficit would not grow in an enormous way. In fact, it would have, and it had various other provisions in it to help third world countries at that time, as they were called, to perhaps catch up a little bit. And they had a variety of aspects to them, but basically they were designed to balance trade. And I think you can make some very good arguments for the fact that balanced trade is good for the world, and the more balanced trade there is, the better. It will continue to be better for cocoa to be raised in Ghana, and coffee in Colombia, and a few things. And over time, the American industry has gone from being an agricultural country. This was nothing but an ag country. I mean, virtually, and that was only 250 years ago. And we have become a very industrial country, and we did not want to make that a situation, in my view, where we ran greater and greater deficits, building up greater and greater debts against the country. So I designed this import certificate thing, which Charlie thought was a little too much like Rube Goldberg. I don't know whether that name is, but it's gimmicky. But it's certainly a lot better than anything I think than we're talking about now. And there's no question that trade can be an act of war, and I think it's led to bad things. Just the attitudes it's brought out in the United States. I mean, we should be looking to trade with the rest of the world, and we should do what we do best, and they should do what they do best. And I don't think it. That's what we did originally. I mean, we were good at producing tobacco and cotton 250 years ago, and we traded it. And we want a prosperous world with 8 countries with nuclear weapons, including a few that are what I would call quite unstable. I do not think it's a great idea to try and design a world where a few countries say, ha, 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 we've won, and other countries are envious. So my import certificate idea, which went no place, I think we've got extra copies. With not a great demand for the copies. If anybody did, and if you'd like, and write the office, I think we could probably send you a copy of it. But the main thing to do is not use trade. Should not be a weapon. And the United States, we've won. I mean, we have become an incredibly important country, starting from nothing 250 years ago. There's nothing been anything like it. And it's a big mistake, in my view, when you have 7.5 billion people that don't like you very well, and you got 300 million that are crowing in some way about how well they've done. And I don't think it's right, and I don't think it's wise. I do think that the more prosperous the rest of the world becomes, it won't be at our expense. the more prosperous we'll become, and the safer we'll feel, and your children will feel someday. So that's. But don't expect my import certificate idea to go up down there with Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations or anything.
This is a question from Mark Bonnke and Helen Friedrichsen in Rapid City, South Dakota. As the U.S. dollar quickly loses value in relation to other foreign currencies in 2025, is Berkshire Hathaway taking steps to minimize this currency risk and its impact on quarterly and annual earnings? If so, please explain. And I'll just add from Mary Cheng, another shareholder, Berkshire currently borrows in Japanese yen to offset its currency risk and its Japanese stock investments. In the future, will you invest in foreign currency denominated assets unhedged?
Yeah, well, we always have, pretty much. The Japanese situation is different because we do intend to stay so long with that position, and the funding situation is so cheap that we essentially have attempted to some degree to match purchases against yen-denominated funding. But that's not a policy of ours. In fact, that's the first time we've done that, and we've owned lots of securities in foreign currency. So we do nothing in terms of the question about its impact on quarterly and annual earnings. We don't do anything based on its impact on quarterly and annual earnings. I mean, there's never been a board meeting I can remember or the conversation I had with Charlie where I say, if we do this, our annual earnings will be this, and therefore we ought to, whether it's accounting or whether anything, we just, the number will turn out to be what it'll be. What counts is where we are 5 or 10 or 20 years from now. And if you start focusing on what number you're going to produce, you will quickly get tempted, at least based on the experience I've seen from viewing 20 companies. You will get so you'll, one way or another, play around with the numbers, and sometimes seriously play around with the numbers. And I've seen people that I trust them in all kinds of other ways, but they regard playing around with numbers as perfectly okay. And that's just not something, we just don't think about that. So actually the yen, the relationship of the yen, behavior of the yen in the last quarter, resulted in certain gap charges, but it doesn't make any difference. It'll change next month or next year, and obviously we wouldn't want to be owning anything that we thought was in a currency that was really going to hell. And that's the big thing we worry about with the United States currency. I mean, the tendency of a government to want to debase its currency over time there's no system that beats that. You can pick dictators, you can pick representatives, you can do anything, but the people, there will be a push toward weaker currencies. And of course, that is, I mentioned very briefly in the annual report that the fiscal policy is what scares me in the United States, because it's made the way it is, and all the motivations are to doing a lot of things that can cause trouble with money. But that's not limited to the United States. It's all over the world, and some places it gets out of control regularly. As they know, they devalue at rates that are breathtaking, and that's continued. I mean, and people can study economics and you can have all kinds of arrangements, but in the end, if you've got people that control the currency, you can issue paper money, and you will, or you can engage in clipping currencies like they used to do centuries ago. Or there will always be people, and it's the nature of their job. I'm not singling them out as particularly evil or anything like that, but the natural course of government is to make the currency worth less over time, and that's got important consequences. And it's very hard to build checks and balances into the system to keep that from happening. And we've had a lot of fun here in the last, either the first 100 days or the last 100 days, whatever you want to call it, watching what happens when people try to make sure that they aren't running fiscal risks. And that game isn't over, and it never will be over, in finality. If you look up and search the great inflations of post-World War II, it's just a list that goes on forever, and the same names keep popping up and everything. So the value of currency is a scary thing. And we don't have any great system for beating that. We do in this particular Japanese position, because we expect to hold it for 50 or 100 years or more. And we will be owning something that's denominated in yen and easily predictable, and we'll just, as long as the carry on it is right and everything, we'll attempt to issue Japanese denominated liabilities, but that's not because of anything we care about in terms of quarterly or annual earnings. Greg, do you have anything to say on that?
I was just going to say that relative to the question, that there's no question we were fundamentally very comfortable with investing in the 5 Japanese companies and recognizing we're investing in yen. The fact we could then borrow in yen was almost just like a nice incremental opportunity. But we are very comfortable both with the Japanese companies and with the currency we would ultimately realize, i.e. in the yen.
Hi, Warren. My name is Robert, and I'm a shareholder from Toronto, Canada. So, Warren, 3 years ago, Charlie Rose asked you a question to the effect of what you wanted to be remembered for. And your reply was, he was a teacher. So in that spirit, Greg, I'm curious to hear maybe a story of where you learned something very profound from Warren. I'm sure you learned many things, but if there's a story that kind of comes up in your mind, we'd love to hear it. And vice versa, if we have the time, Warren, what's something that you maybe learned from Greg? Thank you.
Yeah, I will turn this over to Greg in just 1 second, but now the main thing I'd like to be known for is old age.
Well, Warren is obviously a remarkable teacher, and I benefit from that every day. And as I've already touched on, for many years, I'm fortunate that if I had to be remembered as something right now, obviously I'd want to be remembered as a great father, but equally a coach. And that goes to family, friends, and just being involved with the kids I coach in hockey or baseball or whatever it may be. I think we've got a great opportunity to give back to them at a very young age. So obviously those would be how I'd want to be remembered, and hopefully that'll be many, many years from now. But I love thinking of Warren truly as a teacher, and he's in every day get the opportunity to continue to learn. Warren and I, this dialogue is strong every week, and we're always talking around opportunities in Berkshire or things that are going on globally or in the U.S., and each one's truly a learning moment. I'll maybe go back to the very first meeting with Warren, and because it still stands out in my mind. Obviously, it was an incredible opportunity. Warren was buying or acquiring Mid-American Energy Holdings Company at that time, or thinking about it, and I had the opportunity with my partners to go over there on a Saturday morning, and we're discussing the business, and Warren had the financial statements in front of him. And like anybody, I was sort of expecting a few questions on how the business was performing or a variety of things, but Warren locked in immediately to what was on the balance sheet and the fact we had some derivative contracts, the weapons of mass destruction. And associated with the utility business, we do have them because they use them to match certain positions, and they're never matched perfectly, but you do have them, and we're required in the regulated business. But I just remember Warren going to it immediately and asking the composition of it and what was the underlying risk in it, and wanting to thoroughly understand it. It wasn't that big of a position, but it was absolutely one of the risks he was concerned about as he was acquiring Mid-American, and obviously in light of Enron and everything that had gone on, it was a very pertinent question. And then the follow-up to that was, then there's an energy crisis in the U.S. Around electricity and natural gas, and a variety of folks were making significant sums of money. This is a year, 18 months later. And Warren's follow-up question a couple of years later to me was, and I knew it was more just checking or testing, so how much money are we making during this energy crisis? Are we making a lot? Are the speculative positions in place, and are we making it? And the answer was, we're really not making any more today than we would have been 6 months ago, because all those derivatives were truly to support our business and weren't speculative. So just that focus on understanding the business of what he was acquiring, understanding the risks around it, still stand out in my mind. Warren?
Yeah, it's that's one thing we've really never talked about here, but I spend more time looking at balance sheets than I do income statements. And Wall Street really doesn't pay much attention to balance sheets, but I like to look at balance sheets over an 8 or 10 year period before I even look at the income account, because there are certain things that's harder to hide or play games with on the balance sheet than you can with the income statement. And I mean, neither one gives you the total answer on anything, but you still ought to understand what the figures are saying, and what they don't say, and what they can't say, and what the management will like them to say that the auditors wouldn't like them to say. And I mean, there's just a lot to be learned, and you do learn more. You learn more from balance sheets, in my view, than most people give them credit for. In terms of, I really haven't. I'm not worried about being remembered about that. People don't remember. Well, they don't remember enough about Katharine Graham, for example, in terms of this story that shaped America in many ways. Certainly, it had just all kinds of impact. And I think, I mean, history is so fascinating. And Charlie was probably the best person you could imagine in what he learned. Charlie was never satisfied with just superficial things about any subject. He really wanted to understand it. And he always would tell me that, don't take a position on anything until you can describe the arguments against it better than the person who is arguing with you, that you should be able to argue their case better than they can. He was a remarkable teacher, but so were those other fellows I mentioned. I've had and of course my dad was an incredible teacher. So you make the most of the people you meet that are going to make you a better person, and probably forget about the rest to quite an extent.